Do you ever find yourself talking to sellers wondering, what should I ask them next? Or what do I say? Or maybe you're pretty good. You kind of know what to ask them and what to say, but sometimes you kind of fumble around and you find yourself talking to them for a long time and then having to get back on course to asking them the questions that are the most important, and you don't really have an exact process. Well, I can tell you that in years of talking to wholesale sellers and motivated sellers and doing wholesale deals, I have developed a 10-step process that helps us walk right down sales lane and arrive at a deal. And so if you're talking to someone that is a deal, this is going to help you get that deal, get to the root of why they're selling, and make as much money as possible on that deal. It's going to help set it up for the offer process, which will come next. And if this is somebody that's not quite ready to sell, this is going to help you quickly identify where they're at in the sales, what I call the time continuum, which is starting at that point where they are just thinking about maybe selling all the way till when they actually sell. And so you're going to know where they're at, kind of what they're thinking, and that's going to help you follow up with them. And so whether they're not ready to be a deal yet or they are ready to be a deal, this is going to help you figure out exactly where they're at, what's going on, and do it so much quicker than if you just kind of fumbled around and asked them one thing and then went on the appointment, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe you want to do more deals over the phone, and this is the exact script that's going to help you do that, because you can work 90% of the deal over the phone, sometimes 100%, and this is the exact script to do that. So guys, if you're new, I hope you get so much out of this video. Leave any questions that you have below in the comments. Smash that subscribe button. I leave weekly tips on wholesale real estate. So how to do more deals, how to make more money on deals, how to get more leads, how to convert more leads, how to get your deals sold to cash buyers, and more. So smash that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. Hit that like button if you're getting something out of this, and kick back and get something out of this video. This is at a recent intensive I did in Miami, Florida, and I gave this session on my 10-step seller qualification process, which is going in depth on everything I just told you about. So without further ado, here we go. So it all starts with greeting, okay? The first thing. Now, typically what we say when we got a new lead, we call it back, and they answer, hello, hey, this is Brandon. I'm the one that called about the house. Oh, hey, yeah, okay. So how are you? Good. So I just walked into the office. Can I actually get the address from you again so I can pull up my notes? The reason we do that, when you call people, cold call people for your marketing, or if you send them direct mail, people are going to call in and they're going to assume that you know their address off the top of your head. It sounds funny, but they will. They'll be like, if you're like, hey, can I get the address? 5 out of 10 people are going to say, well, don't you have it? You called me. Don't you have it? You sent me a postcard, right? And if you could tell them, well, yeah, but I sent 10,000 postcards or I called 10,000 people, but it doesn't build credibility. It doesn't build rapport. If you tell them, I just walked into the office, can I get the address again to pull up my notes? It kind of feeds into that subliminal thing, what they were talking about, that yes, I do have it, right? But also you're doing it to save them time so you can get to it real quick. Could be any marketing channel. Could be any marketing channel. Now, if they're calling you live on your website, because it's like a pay-per-click lead or something, and they're reaching directly out to you, you wouldn't need to know. You could just say, hey, okay, great, what's your address? Okay. Right? But if they're responding to your marketing, you put out a message to them, whether it was a postcard or a phone call, and now they're calling you, yeah, it works really good to say, I just walked into the office, can I get the address from you again and pull up my notes? Because then they're like, oh yeah, they actually think you're looking into their property, you've got some information. Now, realistically, what are their notes? The Google Street View, Zillow. Is there an MLS listing? Was there an MLS listing? Right, so if you got MLS access, that's one of the things I like to pop in right away is into our tax system of our MLS, because that will tell me immediately when they bought it, how much they put down, when their last mortgage was taken out, and if there's a recent listing. If it was listed 4 years ago when they bought it, I can see what it looked like 4 years ago, right? So I'll have a pretty good idea what I'm talking about. In the beginning, you don't necessarily need to pull up anything. Let's say you're new to comping and all that kind of stuff, and if you pull up the comps as you're talking to them, you're not going to be able to do both things at once, look at the property values and talk to them. Then don't worry about comping it. Just write the phone up. Just write the address down so at least you have it, right? So that's what I'll tell my guys when they're new. I don't have them getting on Zillow and all that kind of stuff. If anything, I'll have them just pull up the Google Street View and maybe Zillow, and that's it. But I just want them, none of this first call we're gonna do is, we're not educating them, we're starting to educate them, okay, but we're not like closing that gap, so to speak, very much. It's basically, we're fact finding. We're trying to get in their head, crack the shell. Oh, thank you. Find out, what's going on, what the situation is. Appreciate that. Why they're looking to sell, right now, or are they actually looking to sell right now, right? So we can properly status them. What I would pop up, you have MLS access, right? So what I would have up is, do you have like a tax records synced to your, yeah, it's usually, so that I have that one popped up, and then usually Google. Because through Google, 3 things. Number 1, if they go, oh yeah, it's 123 West Vaskarish Drive. What drive? Right? You can literally Google Vaskarish, and even if you misspell it, it's gonna go, did you mean? And you can usually find it that way. So that can be helpful, especially if you get somebody that's old that starts to get frustrated. The second and the third time, wait, what was that? I'm having a hard time, and they start to get frustrated. Google simplifies your life. It'll usually find it for you. And then also with Google, as soon as you Google it in, it's typically the first 2 links are gonna be the Zillow link and the Google Street View. All right, so just walked in the office, can I get the address from you? You're gonna pull up my notes. They're gonna give you the address, right? And if they say, well, if they still say, like, well, don't you already have it? You can just reiterate, well, yes, I do. It's just that I just walked in right now, so it'll take me longer to find that than if you just give it to me, I can pull it up really quick. Okay. 123 West Main Street, right? Now, as I'm typing that in, normally I'll be typing that into Google or to the tax records or to something, okay? If you're not, if you're brand new and you're not going to the computer yet, either way, as you're writing down that address, ask them, so how much do you want for the house? Okay, that's what we call asking price number 1. We're 30 seconds into the call. Hi, this is Josh. Hey, this is Bob. We're playing phone tag about the house. Oh, hey, Bob. I'm so glad that we finally connected. I'm just walking into my office right now. Can I get the address from you again and I'll pull up my notes? Sure, it's 123 Main Street. Okay, give me just a second here. Let me get to it. So, Bob, how much do you want for the house? Right? Like, it's just off the cusp. You want to catch them off guard.
What's your response when they say, I really don't know?
So that's what that's what 80% of the time they say. So if you look right next to asking price, in parentheses, it says, if I don't know, right? And then that's what you say. What have your neighbors been asking on the market? Okay? Now, if they say I don't know, in that little space right there next to asking price number 1, we will literally write IDK. That's what they said. That was the response. That tells me something. I don't need to beat them up and be like, well, you do know, or right? They're not going to give me the real number right now anyways. I've been talking to them for 15 seconds. I expect them to give me a high number, in most cases. I don't really care. It's just a starting point. I'm just breaking the ice, right? A lot of people are going to be too shy to ask that on the whole call. I've asked it 30 seconds in. Who does the seller feel like is a real buyer? Me, because I'm not shy to. So if they ask, I don't know, what have neighbors been asking on the property? Sometimes they still won't tell you. Sometimes, well, I don't know. Okay, I don't know, right? Or, well, I think the one across the street might have sold for $250, right? Across the street sold for $250. Just kind of notating what they say. Okay, then the next thing is occupancy. And there's going to be 3 types of occupancy. There's owner occupied, they live in the house. There's vacant, no one lives in the house. And then there's tenant occupied. And a form of tenant occupied could be a friend or family member lives in the house, right? So it's either one of those. Either they live in the house, someone else lives in the house, or it's vacant. So if it's owner occupied, you move right over to timeline and where to. So, okay, great. So do you live in this house? Yeah, I live here. Oh, great. So when were you thinking about moving? Oh, we're probably thinking about moving sometime in the spring. Oh, okay, awesome. Do you know where you're going to be moving? Oh, probably up north. Oh, cool. So you haven't identified a property yet then? Oh, no, we're just looking right now. Okay? This is valuable information. You know right away this is probably going to go into a follow-up lead. This could be a deal this spring. Maybe I can even bump that timeline up and I can turn it into a deal today. Who knows? But when they called me, their frame of mind was not, I need to sell the house today. It was, they've been talking about selling the house sometime in the near future, and then they got my message, right? So I want to know that right away. I'm not going to hammer this person, because this might be the person that told me I don't know. Well, they didn't know. Okay, now I'm getting some insight. They really haven't spent that much time looking. They haven't talked to realtors and stuff, or have they, right? But it's telling me a lot of information. So if it's owner occupied and they don't know when they want to sell and they don't know where they're going to sell, you're pretty much done right here. You're literally pretty much like, okay, well, I just recently sold a house. I've got to find something this week. Keep my phone number because I'm going to be selling liquidating another one of my properties soon, and I'm going to need to use that money and reinvest it as well. And I love the neighborhood your house is in. So please keep my phone number. When you're ready to sell, please call me first. It'll be the easiest sale of your life. There will be no fees. I'll be paying cash, so it'll be really easy. Please, allow me to make an offer before you, waste money on realtor fees or go through all the trouble of having people tromp through your house. Oh, okay, great, will do, right? And I'm gonna put them in a follow-up queue and I'm gonna stay on top of them and make sure they don't end up selling their house and I didn't realize they were ready, okay? But if they say, oh yeah, next month, we've already got the mover scheduled, we're relocating to another state for work, right? Now I'm going ding, 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 ding. These people are probably ready to do something now if we can come to the right terms and price. So that's why I wanna know that. Now, if it's vacant, I want to know how long it's been vacant. And I want to know who lived there last. Okay, what does that tell me? Well, it could be vacant because the tenant moved out last week and they've got painters over there right now repainting it and they're going to put a new tenant in it next week. Or it could be vacant and it's been vacant for 6 years because they're stressed out about this property. They don't know what to do with it and they were just waiting for Jesus to call them and say, I'll buy it, This is a funny expression, but you know what I mean? Some people, literally that'll happen. Sometimes people just kind of don't do anything until the right person comes along that tells them, here's what we need to do, We got a house that way, actually, it had been vacant for 10 years. It was a $100,000 deal we did. And literally this lady, she'd had it vacant for 10 years. Her husband had died. Her wife was in like China or something, super rich family. And they just had this other house there that had just kind of gotten into the to-do list and put in the drawer, for 10 years. And we're like, oh my gosh. And it was a great deal. If it's rented, you want to know, is it month to month or is there an end date? Is there a lease in place? So you can see how, guys, there's like a parentheses next to a lot of this stuff. Like it literally is telling you if vacant, how long, who lived there last. If rental, so there's 4, 4A, and 4B, depending on if it's owner occupied, if it's vacant, or if it's a rental. And the reason you want to know if it's month to month or if it's a long-term lease in place, when you go to sell it to your buyer, that's going to be super important. If it's leased out through next year, then whoever buys it, they can't flip it next month. They're going to have to wait until the end of next year, so that's going to affect maybe what you can sell it for. If it's month to month, that's a pretty good situation because you can sell it to your investors now and you can say, hey, there's a tenant there, but you can get them out next month if you want to, right? So I love month-to-month leases on properties because whether I'm going to sell it to a landlord investor or to a fix and flip investor, it could go either way. Okay. Same thing with vacant. Vacant's great too because that one can go either way too. Long-term leases are the worst for when it comes to dispositioning them. Doesn't mean they can't be deals. But sometimes you might need to go a little bit lower if it's leased for a year because you're going to know like, oh man, it's going to have to be a really sweet deal for a fix and flip person to wait a year on this before they sell it. Well, a lot of times long-term tenants will be month to month. They signed a lease, but they've been, and it was good for the first year, and then they just kept paying monthly and went month to month on that, which is great. Yeah. And if that's the case, if they say great long-term renters and they have a good relationship with them, blah, 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 I won't come out and say like, oh, well, awesome. I'm probably going to give them notice right away because we're going to flip it. I'll just be like, well, that's great. Awesome. We love that we love that they're there because that means it's not empty. So we're not going to be missing out on rent or anything like that. So, what we normally do in a situation like that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is we'll usually just close escrow, keep everything really simple for them, and then contact them after the closing and let them know that we're our new owners and blah, blah, blah. And then to the seller, that means, oh, cool. That takes all the pressure off of them. They're like, oh, sweet, you're going to do all this and we don't even have to rock the boat with the tenant. Now, some sellers will just be like, okay, great. I've got a really good relationship with them. I'm going to give them your info and let them know that they're going to be sending rent to a new place, right? That's one end of the spectrum. And then some are going to be like, okay, yeah, if we could not have the tenants know that I'm selling it, that would be great. And you can just contact them after the sale. So you'll get both. So we're talking about occupancy. So then the next one is number 5, is why are you selling? And a lot of times you won't need to ask that. Okay, a lot of times the occupancy and the timeline and the vacancy and the rental, when you ask that stuff, it'll kind of smoke out while they're selling it. They're like, oh yeah, it's vacant. Well, how long's it been vacant? Well, 2 months. I had a tenant in there, he destroyed it. I was going to put it back together, but it's just been sitting there for 2 months. So yeah, I think I just want to sell it, right? Do you need to ask them why they're selling it? You could ask them like, is there any other reasons you wanted to sell it now? But my point is, you're like, if you get to number 5 and you don't already know why they're selling it now, then simply ask them, so why are you selling it now? And they might say, well, I don't know that I am, but you called me. That's okay, right? At least that still tells you something. And if you have somebody else filling this out for you and it brings it to you, now you know that. Like, well, this person kind of responded because we called them. It's not like they were necessarily already looking. So it's kind of starting to paint the picture of what's going on in their life, okay? 5A is, have you talked to anyone else about selling your home yet? Any other buyers or realtors? We're not afraid to ask this question when we put it on the sheet, because that tells you something, right? Like, if it's the person that's like, well, why are you selling? Well, I don't know, because you called me. Have you talked to anybody else? Nope. Okay. You kind of know where they're at in the cycle, right? Or if they're like, oh yeah, I had a realtor out here yesterday. Yeah, it sounded like, I don't know if I want to do that. They told me I need to fix this, and they charge a commission, and they were going to have buyers coming through it. I didn't really like hearing all that kind of stuff. Right? Now I'm starting to get some insight as to what they know. So later when it comes time to close the gap because they don't like my offer and the realtor told them a little bit more, I can go back and be like, well, you told me that, you were worried about, paying fees and you didn't want people coming showing your house all the time, and right? So it gives you some insight. When you get after that, so now you know a lot of the information, right? You know the address, you know the vacancy status, you know why they're selling it. Now really, you want to just basically get an overview of the property. So if you can find pictures of it, it was recently listed for rental or for sale online, you can ask them like, hey, I see some pictures on here online from a couple years ago. Does this property still look the same? If they say yes, you don't even have to ask them a ton of questions. It's pretty much right there. But the important questions that you're going to need to underwrite a property, they're all right here. We put PIX listing in bold because if there is, that's like a quick reference to ourselves when we go to underwrite it. Like, hey, we can actually just pull up the old listing and look at the pictures. Okay. The other stuff that we want to know is bedrooms and bathrooms, square foot, what year it was built. I like to look up the Zillow estimate as well here. Don't ask them the Zillow estimate. Okay, that's for your own knowledge. But when you get in here, you might pull it up on Zillow to see if there's pictures or whatnot, and just see that. Because if their asking price number 1 was $300,000 and the Zillow estimate's $301. It gives you some insight as to that's what they're looking at. A lot of this stuff too is going to be in the tax record. So like you don't necessarily need to ask them the year built and the square footage because a lot of times that's going to show. But sometimes we'll ask them, is there any additional square footage? You might need to clarify square footage. Like, oh, is that counting the basement or is that not counting the basement, etc. Bedrooms and baths, unless there's an old listing, a lot of tax records don't show how many bedrooms and baths. Might show the square footage, but not the bedrooms and baths. So we'll ask them that. We like to ask them, rather than having them, talk for 20 minutes about every little feature about the house, we like to ask them, hey, is the house in pretty good condition? Have you maintained everything? That'll tell you right away, do you need to fix anything? Let them tell you what's wrong with it, and you can kind of read between the lines. So it says right here at the bottom, 6C, maintained 1 through 5. You don't ask them, hey, is it a 1 or is it a 5? How would you rate your house? Don't ask them to rate their house. That's for you. Based on what they're telling you, you're going to kind of envision the house and you're going to rate the house 1 through 5. So when you go to underwrite it and you're comparing values and stuff, you can kind of know approximately where you would slot it with the comparables. Is it a 1? Is it like a shack falling down? Is it a 5? Like they just remodeled it. So the way we code it is 1 is it's, falling apart, fire damaged, it's a shack, it could be a tear down, it's just crappy, right? A 2, it's really rough, but it might be livable, but it's pretty rough. A 3, that's like an average rental, right? It's kind of nothing fancy, it might be kind of dirty, maybe needs a couple minor maintenance things, maybe has some deferred maintenance, maybe needs paint and carpet, etc. A 4 is it's typically a homeowner's house that's really well taken care of, but it's not necessarily like 2018 updated. It might have been updated 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe they updated the kitchen, but the bathrooms are still kind of dated. It's like your stereotypical nice house that's typically going to get listed. And then a 5 would be like it was just like remodeled right now. We like to ask them the floors and the countertops. That's why those are bold. If you got a seller that's real what do you need to know? Blah, blah, and they're trying to be real fast, ask them what kind of floors and countertops it has. If they tell you it's got hardwood floors and granite countertops, right? You know this is probably a 4, maybe even a 5. If they tell you it's got the original 1970s countertops and cabinets and carpet throughout, you know it's kind of dated, right? So I'll give you a pretty good idea. And then parking, that's going to be like, does it have a garage, carport, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of times you can see that too from the street view. Does it have a pool? Depending on your market, you might not ask everybody that. Like, I don't know, in Jersey, what percentage of houses would you guys say have pools? Like less than 10%, 5% even? Yeah, so you probably wouldn't even need to ask that, because probably if it has a pool, you're going to see it on the satellite view anyways, or they're going to tell you like it has a pool. So I would scratch that one. For Phoenix, you know, every other house has a pool, so that's a bigger factor. And then same thing with like air conditioning. I don't know how it is in Jersey. I'm assuming air conditioning is like what, 50-50 up there, or does everybody have it? Okay, so that might be a good question there, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and that would affect it. And if they happen to put in a new AC, it's one of those older houses, but they're like, we just put an AC next year. Now that would be like kind of a bonus. So that'd be good. So I like to ask them the AC, if it has AC, how old the AC is. I like to ask them how old the roof is. And then these ones here at the bottom, I only ask if it's older than 1985. If the house was built before 1985, we like to ask them, does it have updated windows? Because pretty much all newer houses are going to have like dual pane windows, the updated style. But if they're like pre-1985, there's a good chance that they're going to be like the old single pane. So I'll ask them that. Does it have updated windows, or is it still the old kind? Oh, it's still the old kind. Okay. And then I'll ask them, has the sewer line been replaced? Okay, sewer line in Phoenix is about a $6,000 job on a regular residential house from the street to the main line. So a lot of times they'll be like, well, I don't know. I'll be like, well, you've lived in the house 30 years. If you haven't done it, then it's probably the original line. Oh, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it just means it probably is going to need replaced sooner than later, so, right? And then same thing, plumbing and electrical, have those been updated? So part of our story is, and this is pretty much always true in my company because we have a big rental property portfolio and we've constantly been selling and acquiring other ones for the last several years, but we'll let them know. We recently sold a property. The IRS only gives us 45 days to identify what we're going to buy, and if we do that, we don't have to pay taxes. We can reinvest our profits, but we're getting down to our final days. Okay, so now when they're like later after we make the offer, if they're like, well, I want to think about it, we're like, well, remember we told you we only have a few days left? So we're not like, it's like what I was talking about the Badger yesterday. We're not doing the Badger thing going, well, if you don't do it today, I'm not going to buy your house, right? That won't work very well. But if you already started to tell them, like your story, you sold one, you only have like a week left, now it's very real to them, and that will create urgency. Okay, so part of our story in my business, and you can adapt this to work for you, so you're comfortable with talking to sellers, right? But you definitely want, the whole point of step number 8 here is that you're creating urgency. You're letting them know before you even start negotiating them or anything like that, that you know you're looking to buy now. Okay. And they might tell you like, well, that's great, you know, unfortunately then our house isn't going to work for you because we're definitely not selling for at least a month. That's fine, but at least you know that. You still told them your story and you saw, did that get them to get more excited? Well, okay, maybe we would sell now. Because sometimes it will. If it didn't, then that's fine. You're still going to follow up with them. You can always roll that into like, okay, well, you know what, we're supposed to sell another one in a couple weeks or whatever, right? You can come up with the situation and continue to follow up with them until they are ready to sell. But you're trying to get them to, ideally, you get them to commit today, assuming price and terms are good. Yeah, so right here is just the offer proposition. We're reminding them that there would be no fees, that they can pick the date, that they can buy it as is. All that stuff we said in our original message, we're emphasizing it a little bit more here, okay? And then now we've talked to them, we've built a little rapport, we've said that, now we're gonna ask them the price again. So with all that being said, because assuming they said yes, they would sell at the right price today, blah, 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 now you're gonna ask them again, okay, so with all that being said, no fees, no closing date, what would you take for the house today? They still might not tell you, or they might tell you. A lot of times, asking price number 1 is gonna be like Zillow or higher. Asking price number 2 is gonna be a little bit lower. Now they realize you're a real buyer, that you've identified with them that they're a real seller, and they're like, well, you know, if I didn't have to pay closing fees and you let me pick the date and all these things, I mean, I'd probably take about X. Because even a seller, let's say Zillow's 200 and they want 200 off the bat, even that seller, if they're a real seller and they actually know they're going to pay closing costs and some other these things if they go retail, by the end of the phone call, they should be at least like, well, if I were to sell it with the realtor, that would cost me 6%, and I know I'd have a couple grand in closing costs. So, I mean, I'd sell it to you for 190, right? It's still not going to be a deal. If it's worth 200 retail, 190 is not going to be a deal. But at least if they're a real seller and they actually know these things, right, they should at least come down closing costs and stuff. Or maybe they'll come back more. Doesn't matter. Just like asking price number one, you're not going to beat them up here. You're not going to start negotiating here. You can say like, well, that sounds a little bit high, but you're now getting into step number 10. That sounds a little bit high. That sounds a little bit retail. That sounds maybe a little bit higher than retail, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let me do some homework, and I'll call you back with an offer, okay? That's if you're going to make the offer over the phone. If you're going to do it in person, then, okay, that all sounds great, and that sounds like it might be a little bit on the high side, but I need to take a look at it. Are you available right now that I can come over, or is tomorrow at 10 a.m. better? Okay, so now you're going to set the appointment for either 20 minutes from now or 2 hours from now. Let's say you're literally headed out the door to an appointment, and the person calls you. You went through that whole script in 5 minutes, and you know, oh my gosh, now I'm late for my appointment. You might tell them when you set the call back, like, hey, are you going to be around for a couple hours? I was on my way. I was headed out the door right when you called, so I don't have a chance to look right now. But as soon as I get back, I promise I'm going to look at this first thing and do a little bit of homework and call you back with an offer. If you like that offer, we can move forward. If you don't like it, no worries, no pressure. If you want to think about it, you can think about it. If we're close, you let me know what we need to do to make a deal. And they're going to like that. They're going to make great, because that's what they want. They want an offer. They're a real seller. They really want to sell their house. So they're going to be like, yeah, call me back. Let me know.